Stathopoulos and Josh Phegan come together in an incredible podcast, Grow, Scale, Master.
An energetic approach to drive progress, master skills, build strengths and put the strategy back into rapid business and personal success.
Backed by real-world experience in rapid scaling to playing the long-term game of business, it's the story of all the lessons learned on the journey to mastery.
Be inspired, renew your energy and chase the future with Grow, Scale, Master.
Con, one of the great conversations is to think about layered versus exponential growth. And the way that I've always thought about that is that like layered was a little bit more next year. And you kind of see people like, oh, how many transactions did you do? I did 20. And how many do you want to go for next year? I want to do 21, man. And you're like, and that's okay because, in all reality, what they're actually saying is that maybe they're really happy with that number, or maybe they don't actually know how they did the 20. So they don't actually know what you need to do or let go of or add to the system to get it to 25, 50, 100 or 200. But what I do know is that when you start thinking about exponential growth, and this is that whole 10x factor, that if you're doing 20 transactions and then you times that by 10 and now you're going to go and do 200, man, there's no way that you can do that on your own. That's going to be 21 open for inspections every Saturday over the course of 10 months. That's going to be you and 2 other agents working with you. You're going to need a head of operations. You're going to need to make sure that your marketplace is big enough to support 200. You're going to need to start not promising that you're going to turn up at every single open for inspection. How important is it for people to understand about, what they've actually got around them in terms of all of the infrastructure and systems and things that they've got in play, and whether or not they're actually ready for exponential growth, or whether or not this is a position that layered growth is exactly where they need to be right now, given their lack of investment in systems and people?
I think, Josh, whether you're looking at it from an individual agent perspective or from a business perspective, I mean, we've 30x'd our business over the last 3 years. So we've gone through that exponential growth phase and now we're into the layering stage. And I think at every level of growth, it requires a different version of yourself. And I think you speak about it, giving yourself a bit of a software upgrade every 60, 90 days, right? So most businesses that I've had the pleasure of either working in or being a part of or actually, experiencing in real estate have every single tool and every resource at their disposal for any person that wants to really exponentially grow their business or layer the growth of their own business. The difference is people whether they make the choice to change their behavior and actually act to be able to grow, or they're just, staying in that comfort zone. So what's really important is being able to look at what your market opportunity looks like, number of transactional volume, what are the market influences in terms of competition, the economy, etc. All those macro factors that you really can't control, but you need to be aware of. And then it's actually bringing it down to the micro factors that you can completely control, which is, what does my prospecting plan look like? What's my lead generation? They're 2 different things. Plan look like? Do I run off an ideal week? Do I have structure? When was the last time I actually had my competency checked around my listing presentation, or, days on market may be increasing or auction clearance rates, decreasing? When was the last time that I actually gave myself a bit of an upgrade when it came to vendor management and whatnot? And I think once you start looking at yourself internally, the difference between layering and exponential can be just a couple of decisions. So you can actually go, you know what, I want to go from 20 to 25. But once you get that energy, that momentum, and you start getting used to that, that process, that engine running, it can be very easy to get exponentially ahead whilst actually doing the same amount of work or the same level of work, if that makes sense.
And so this is that whole conversation about whether or not people are abundant or scarcity in their mindset.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
Because you won't invest in the systems or the people if you're not in a position that you start to think about, how do I actually get into that abundant feeling? And I always say, hey, if I put an extra $10,000 in your account, or there was an extra $20,000 or 50, tell me what the number is before you'd put that next person on inside of your team. And tell me what that number is before you'd put that person in charge of head of sales, like whatever it looks like inside of the business.
Yes.
And I think that this is the thing is that like people are climbing a mountain as though no one has climbed this mountain before. But what's actually very clear is that many people have gone before you and have done this very successful inside of our industry. So how do you check in with someone to say, hey, so what are the scale points? Is it about number of transactions? Is it about the total fees that I'm writing? And I think that one of the big things for me is that sometimes people chase the wrong number. So, and I hear hear this, I've got 5,000 homes. Or in the UK, they've got 5,000 chimneys. When I heard that, I was like, what are you talking about? Right. But the interesting conversation of what I learned very quickly is, but what percentage actually trade every year?
Correct.
So, like if you are in a position that you need to do 50 sales a year, but there's only 25 transactions in your market, you're going to need 200% market share.
Correct.
And so that whole idea is about, thinking very quickly about, is it a person or a system?
Yeah.
So there's some old school activities, right? One that I've heard John talk about a long time, John McGrath, is about, stop, start, continue.
Yes.
I think I saw that at one of my first ever ARICs. My version of that I love is love, dislike, and hate. Yes. So what I do is every so often I'll just sit down and write down a list of all the things I'm doing that I'm currently doing that I hate doing. What are the things that I'm doing that I dislike doing? And what are the things that I'm doing that I love doing? And the essential core parts of my role can't be in dislike and hate.
Yes.
Right? But other things can be. And so that's actually okay. Is that a good way just
absolutely.
to open up the mind?
100%. So Amit Nayak, when he joined our business, he was a very successful agent at another agency, writing about $1 million in fees, working 7 days a week, himself and his brother. And they were basically a jack of all trades and a master of a few. So we exactly did that. We took a piece of paper and wrote down, what do you love doing? What do you hate doing? What do you dislike doing? And then we built a team around that. No surprise, later in his first year, he 3x'd his business. He went from 1 to 3 million. And I think that investment point is, when are you actually going to, and I don't want to say this in a disrespectful way, at what point do you decide to go from amateur to pro? When do you start leveling up? I've always recruited ahead of the curve before I've needed that person. If I've identified the talent, or if I've identified the growth trajectory with, what I'm kind of planning out and where our vision's going, and I find that person, then I'm going to recruit them, because when I need them, it's too late. And so I think the biggest thing that I see is that people don't let go to grow. They're not letting go of the things that are holding them back. Maybe it's imposter syndrome. Maybe I don't deserve to do 50 transactions from 20. Maybe I don't know how to handle that level of success, or maybe I'm just not cut out for this. Maybe last year was a fluke. I kind of look at it and I go, if you've got a red hot plan that you execute brilliantly and you nail the basics every single opportunity that you can, you're probably going to be in the top 10% in your marketplace overnight. Then it's about how do you rapidly scale that, either for layered or exponential growth. And that's always going to be making sure you get the best talent on ground that you can possibly find.
How quickly can you articulate the strategy? So we have 3 letters in our business called KJT, and it stands for Keep Josh Talking.
Yep.
So anything that's not me talking, I'm no longer allowed to do. Now, the interesting foundational piece, do you know how empowered the team is now? Because they know that, Josh isn't allowed to do that function. So whatever it is, outside of me being on stage, someone else has got to do it. Now, Con, it's not because I'm lazy. It's about knowing where the specialty is. And like in an onion, the most potent point of the onion is the center part, and then it grows out in terms of its layers. But you've got to get that potent bit right. Now, no one else in my team wants to do the talking, wants to be on stage, wants to be in the creation of the content. But when it comes to invoicing and flights and customer liaison and running a whole calendar, all of those things are a really important part. How important is it for you as an individual to strip away and to let go so that you can actually grow?
Oh, critical. I mean, think about a surgeon, right? Not comparing ourselves to surgeons, but do you see the surgeon checking you in, grabbing your healthcare card, walking you upstairs to your room, giving you your robes, doing the anesthetic? They don't even do the cut. They come in there and they perform the most precise of procedures, and then they walk out and they've got a team that support them. And I think if we can take a little bit of a leaf out of that book and go, what are the 1 or 2 main things that Josh or Con or whoever it might be is exceptional at doing? Everything else is noise. So if you can't let go, it's very hard to grow. And I think the biggest challenge that I see, particularly in our business and in real estate, is that the system is almost identical, yet everyone wants to do it their way. Okay. And you can take some lessons. I mean, you coach Alex Phillips and you've been working with him for a long time. There's 200 plus transactions. Success leaves clues. Just follow that process. Go into Blueprint, go into your digital library and find out all those episodes and replicate it. Find someone that's in your marketplace that might want to, share with you how they've structured their team or their day, or someone in your office even. But I think the most important thing is that if you can't let go, it's very hard to grow. If you can't let go of the 5 listings that you do and you're doing it that simple way, then how are you going to do it when you're doing 20? And I think that's where people get overwhelmed and they get stuck and caught in their own heads.
I think the title is general manager. I think that's Emily's title inside of the business, or CEO. We basically call her GOD, God, for general operations director. But the basic idea is to think about this. One thing that she said to me, she said, Josh, when I first came into the business, we were absolutely schooled that every single San Pellegrino water, that the San Pellegrino logo had to be the right way facing.
Absolutely.
She goes, I've never forgotten it.
Yeah.
So this is the interesting conversation when you go a decade down the track. We just have the perception that everyone gets that, but maybe they actually don't. And I came home to my house and had to realign some of the things in the fridge. But I kind of like that idea about the role of exceptional talent. How important is it to, being able to get the right people inside of the business to allow you to get that exponential growth?
Well, you're the custodian of the standards that you hold. So the way that you dress, the way that you act, the way that you behave, the way that you put your pointer boards out. I say to my team, just imagine I'm watching, or your neighbours are watching how you open up your boot. How you put your jacket on, or how you put you grab your bag, and how you put your pointer boards on, and your A-frames and your flags and whatnot. I think it's about making sure that you've got the right level of standards for yourself. You're very clear on what it is that you want to achieve. We spoke about vision earlier, but more importantly, it's being able to go, hey, this is where I am today. I understand and recognize that I need someone that's going to help me layer or exponentially grow my business. And then it's making the call and actually acting. But the biggest key thing here is that a lot of people, particularly in real estate, have never led other people, let alone themselves. So I think leadership plays a really big part in making sure that, sure, you can onboard someone and you can teach them, about Agent Box and all the other systems and whatnot. But what is it that you actually need that person to do? Do they have a really clear job description, roles, responsibilities, and KPIs and measurements? Do you have a 30-day or a 60-day or a 90-day success plan? And then do you have weekly one-on-ones, daily hubs, where you can actually meet with them to be able to find out if we're on track or off track? Now, if you can do that, then I think you can actually exponentially grow your business. If you can only do half of that, you might still get growth, but it might be layered. It might be still a little bit slower, but the result is you need to be able to lead yourself before you can lead talent.
The interesting conversation here is about you got to hold yourself to really high standards. It's like before I send an email, I read it twice, and I expect everyone else in my team to do the same.
Yeah.
And it's the same on an SMS and all of those things. And I think this is an important conversation that you've got to make the decision to go all in to say that I want to be the sort of person that someone would say, that's the benchmark that I want to get to in my business.
Yeah, absolutely. My first sales manager outside of real estate said to me, what do you want to be one day? And I said, I'd love to be the CEO. And at that time, I had blonde tips and an earring and a goatee. And he said to me, well, why don't you behave like the CEO today? Okay. And for me, I've always had that in the back of my mind that if you see me, which you have, Josh, I'm in a suit and tie. I'm shaved every single day. And the reason why is because I want to make sure that I'm holding the standard for our business. So if anyone ever needs me at a drop of a hat to go and see a vendor, to go to a listing appointment, someone walks in, wants to list or sell their property, whatever it might be, I'm ready and I'm prepared. So if you can't hold yourself to the standard, then that is your standard, if that makes sense.
So have you ever heard of the concept of do, be, have?
Yes.
So, and a lot of people are the other way around where have, be, do.
Yeah.
So like that whole idea is that literally when I have the car, then I'll be the person. And when I'm the person, then I'll do the work.
Yeah.
Whereas it actually goes the other way, which is ultimately what are the things that I need to do to be that sort of person that gets to have that sort of thing. And, there's the old school, I think Brian Tracy had it, fake it till you can make it. And a lot of people rip that apart. But the reality of it is that literally it's about, becoming that style of person and thinking about what you'd need to do and actually going and doing those actions.
Yeah.
Experiences that rapidly shaped you.
One of the foundational conversations or experiences that I had when I was first starting out, I was like 17, 18 years old, and I was working inside of newspapers and things were going pretty well for me. I was doing my uni degree at the time and, DJing on the side, lots of great things were happening. And I went to this situation. I came to Sydney and I had the chance to meet up with an author, a guy by the name of Jonah Nader at the time. And, we were in a conversation. He'd written a book called How to Lose Friends and Infuriate Your Boss. And it was a fascinating book and I'd enjoyed it. And we ended up having this catch up and, I didn't have a lot of money at the time. I'm, just fresh out of school and just starting in my life and things are going on. And we go down to the Four Seasons Hotel, right down there near Circular Quay. And so a lot of people would know it and you kind of get there and, I'm lucky to have a couple $100 probably to my name at this point. And as I go in there, we sit down and we have this lunch and Jonah decides that he wants to meet me and he's going to mentor me for an hour, as a part of this thing. So I spent an hour with him and we had a great conversation. It was about getting vision and clarity and where you wanted to go in your life and what you wanted to achieve. Anyway, we get to the point in the lunch and, the dessert menu comes out. Now, I'm from Albury, so, there's nothing wrong with that. But like literally the, kind of dessert was...
Vanilla slice?
No, not even, mate. It was actually just vanilla ice cream and maybe some Ice Magic. So it was a good life, Ice Magic was great.
Great life.
And all of a sudden, this dessert menu comes out and there's like all these desserts on it and I've never heard of any of this stuff before.
Right.
And so like we're used to going to maybe Pizza Hut and back then you used to get like the soft serve or something. Right. Yeah. So I was like, okay, great. And so he goes, oh, which one would you like? And I'm looking for like, ice cream and Ice Magic and it's not on the list, right? So I'm like, oh, no, I'll be fine. He's like, oh, and he could sense that there was this nervous trepidation. And he said, oh, why is that? I said, oh, I don't know what these are, this souffle thing.
Yeah.
No, that's a souffle. I was like, okay. He goes, okay, great. So he gets the waiter across and he says to the waiter, we'll have every one of the desserts. Right. And there's like 10 desserts on this menu.
Right.
And they're $20 a pop. And so now this bill's has gone to $200.
Yeah.
And I'm in the background, I'm freaking out because like I don't have $100 to pay for my half of these desserts and nor do I want to eat that much amount of dessert either. And it was interesting. So he could see, he says, don't worry about the money. I want you to just understand this experience. So all the desserts come out and then there's literally, they get a tasting spoon for each one. And he said, okay, great. Now you have to taste every single one of the desserts, and then you have to tell me which one you want.
Yeah, wow.
And so I was like, oh, okay, great. And I tasted them all, and I decided on the tiramisu, and that was it. And I had a cream brulee and all sorts of things. And the interesting conversation is that he said, okay, great. And now here's the great metaphor in life. He goes, sometimes you got to really try a lot of things until you find the one that you love and then you go all in.
Yeah.
And I'll never, ever forget the power of that story and the power of mentorship, how someone older than me had taken some interest to spend some time with me to open up my mindset and my view about what was actually possible and giving me opportunity and to actually say, you know what, it's actually okay to try lots of different things. But then when you make the decision what you want, you go after that like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a great story. It reminds me when we first got into Parramatta, I sat down day 3. So it was May 26, 2020. And on May the 29th, John McGrath came to the office and said, well, you've been here for 3 days, so what are we doing? What's the plan? And I said, John, I think we can get the office in the next 10 years to $10 million in fees. And he said, righto. And then he said, what about the next 5 years? I said, I definitely think we can get it to 5. And I remember he took his glasses off and he was wiping it on his shirt. And he just looked at me, and this is the old Peter Thiel quote, which is, Con, what would you need to do and who would you need to become to do your 10-year plan in 6 months? And it was one of those first times where I had an aha moment, like a real aha moment. I said, say that again. And he said, what would you need to do and who would you need to become? And I said, right. I've never ever thought of, solving a problem like that. He goes, well, let's do it. Who would you need to become? I said, I'd have to be the president of my agent's fan club. I'd, want to support them at open homes and auctions and listing appointments and vendor meetings and get price adjustments and, setting reserve meetings. And I'd be doing one-on-ones and, town halls and village meetings. And I'd be doing also, so I had this whole list. He goes, great, write them all down. He goes, they're the things that you would have to do. And I'd obviously recruit talent, etc. But who would you need to become? And that was probably the biggest aha moment that I had that exponentially changed our progression and our trajectory over the last, 3 or 4 years. And it's a common concept that I think about, basically most quarters about what do we now need to do? That software upgrade we spoke about, just in terms of how do we become better, always brings me back to that. Something that's changing your view.
Con, one of the great conversations is that, I'll show something great in training. And the other day I've really focused on this 40-40 concept of, you get a listing and who are the 20 previous market appraisals of a similar type and 20 previous market appraisals of an aspirational type. They should know about that new listing and then be advised when it gets sold. And, everyone kind of sits in the training room and goes, yeah, that's great dialogue and that's a great idea. And then my fear is that then they go back to the office and nothing changes. And I say, so how do you go to put that into play? And so, I give them a couple of minutes to do it and they come back with solutions like, I'd put it in the calendar and I'd give it to my assistant or I'd, we'd need some dialogue for that. And I go, yeah, but business is all about systems. And so what it really got me to think about is that with the advent of all of the electronic nature of residential real estate now, a lot of the things that are related to compliance are automated. So agency agreement comes in, write the letter to the solicitor, get a copy of the contract, that's all done now. But the things that are not are the things that are generated, that are around lead generation and the prospecting side of stuff. And that's where people go missing. So I say, okay, great. Is it a form? Is it a checklist? Is it a visual or a dialogue? And people are like, well, what are you talking about? Well, a form, our favourite one is an agency agreement or a sales advice. a checklist is a sales file checklist. This is actually what happens. A visual is the thing that sells and tells the story of 1,000 words, how many transactions, highest, lowest sale price, you get the idea. And a dialogue is designed to speed up the conversation and to speed conversion.
Yeah.
So when you think about that, which one is it? And they're like, oh, well, in all reality, it's a couple of them, but the checklist is actually it.
Yeah.
So agency agreement is read and received and is compliant, order a copy of the contract, next conversation, find 20 market appraisals of a similar type, you get the idea,
Yep.
and you follow the checklist. And that's what's gone missing inside of businesses, is that literally the most important parts, the checklist-driven approach to making sure that every single time we do these very basic things because they turn one listing into two.
Couldn't agree with you more, mate. Absolutely, completely agree. It's interesting that people will, and I think that the genius is in the simplicity of that. It's so basic, but it's so easy to execute. But conversely, it's also really hard to execute too. Just think about everyone's heard the airline pilot. They still run checklists, even though they may have flown that plane 10,000 times. They still use a checklist. Why? Because if they don't do 100% of the basics and something goes wrong, well, something goes wrong. It's exactly the same with what we do. I love that.